Welcome to the major regions of Egypt. Life in ancient Egypt was concentrated along the shores of the Nile and divided into two regions. Lower Egypt was situated on the Nile Delta near the Mediterranean. Until 3100 BCE and the unification of Egypt, each region had its own pharaoh and crown. Lower Egypt's crown was red and marked with symbols of papyrus and bees. Upper Egypt's crown was white, with symbols of lotus. Both regions had competing major cities, most notably Memphis in Lower Egypt and Thebes in Upper Egypt. There were different Many of the temples were designed in such a way as to represent the two regions, and ceremonies often incorporated Upper and Lower Egypt in their rituals. Welcome to Bringer of Life, the River Nile. The ancient Egyptians called the dark fertile soil of the Nile the Black Lands, and the surrounding desert was referred to as the Red Lands. The dramatic difference of productive land opposed to barren desert had The Nile determined much of Egyptian civilization. For example, the seasonal cycle of the Nile was so consistent that ancient Egyptians created their calendar around it. The flood season, or Akhet, was when the departing floodwaters left arable soil for crops. It was followed by the growing and harvesting seasons, known as Peret and Shemu. These regular seasons, along with abundant The River Nile, flowing from the south to the north, neatly traversed through both Upper and Lower Egypt. All of Egypt's major cities were built along this narrow ribbon of life. Protected by mountain ranges and deserts which acted as natural barriers to enemies, and sustained by both ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks referred to the Nile as the river in their respective languages. Stretching a distance of over 6,700 kilometers, the Nile is one of the longest rivers in the world. It flows south to north, spanning 11 countries. The River Nile originates in the region of the Great Subequatorial Lakes, including one of the largest in the world, Lake Victoria near Tanzania. The river flows through African equatorial forests, swamps, volcanic lands, steppes, and deserts, splitting apart for a while and picking up various sediments from each region and carrying them all the way to Egypt. Its main artery, known as the White Nile, rejoins with the Blue Nile in Khartoum. This is where it weaves through rich deposits of silt and nutrients, carrying them along in its wake. The Nile crosses 6 cataracts from the south to the north, creating natural obstacles between the various sections of the river. The cataracts are long zones of about 100 kilometers, where the bubbling and rapidly swirling waters advance tumultuously amid enormous heaps of rocks and benches of hard stone. It is after crossing Nubia and the first cataract that the river officially returns to Egypt in Aswan. There are still 1,000 kilometers before it reaches Cairo and the Delta, bringing life to those living on its shores before it eventually empties into the Mediterranean Sea. Ancient Egyptian irrigation and water use was centered around the Nile. However, they also had access to streams and rivers, as well as several large lakes. The Delta, situated at the north end of the Nile, also known as Lower Egypt, is a large irrigated area where the river splits into several tributaries. The Delta had several major brackish coastal lakes, bodies of water separated from the sea by thin strips of land. A mix of deep to shallow waters, salt swamps, and sand plains, these lakes were refuge to a wealth of species, as well as water and land plants. The occasional bandit could also be found sheltering within the denser reeds, waiting for the unwary traveler. Welcome to Deserts of Egypt. Reaching out on either side of the lush Nile, are the harsh, arid Western Desert and the mountainous Eastern Desert. They cover the White Desert in the northeast of the Sahara owes its name to its white limestone soil, contrasting with the yellow sand. The wind has eroded the rocks of the White Desert into stone mushrooms, the most famous of which is referred to as the Finger of God. The Great Sand Sea is a large unbroken desert that reaches out through western Egypt and eastern Libya. It is home to a unique geological formation known as Libyan silica glass. The pale yellowish-green material ranges from pebble-sized fragments to glass rocks the size of rough boulders. So many tours, so little time. Welcome to the Katara Depression. The Katara Depression is located in the northwest part of Egypt. Reaching 18,000 square kilometers, the basin is The climate is very arid, with average temperatures reaching 36 degrees Celsius. The famous Siwa Oasis is located on the protected southwestern region. Today, the Katara Depression is utilized for oil exploration. Welcome to Siwa. The Siwa Oasis is in the western desert of Egypt. Geographically, the Siwan Oasis is located. Old Kingdom Egyptians referred to the oasis as cauldron due to its unique geographical structure. Oases were crucial for nomadic tribes and caravans. Because of the dry climate, there is very little rainfall to sustain the oases. Instead, underground rivers flood the natural basins. Since many oases have a north-south orientation parallel to the Nile, some geologists suggest they were one. The Libyan oases are the best known, as they are geographically and culturally linked to the Nile Valley and the Delta. These western oases have a distinct geology from the other regions of Egypt. The most famous and important oases are Karga, Dakhla, Farafra, Baharia, and Siwa. The Spring of the Sun is one of many thermal sources in Siwa, with the particularity that Cleopatra would have bathed in this one, giving it its name. The presence of the source beneath was attested already by Herodotus during the 5th century BCE, when the oasis was called. Oracles predicted the future, delivered omens that could be more or less obscure, and offered divine guidance. The Siwan oracle was considered. It is no wonder that Alexander the Great made the perilous journey to Siwa in order to consult the oracle, emulating the actions of mythical heroes. The powerful and the rich would send gifts or travel great distances in order to ensure their good fortune by gaining the blessing. The Temple of the Oracle of Amun was built in the 6th century BCE by Pharaoh Amasis. In the game, its entrance is guarded by ram-headed sphinxes, the animal representing Amun. They were inspired by similar statuary located at the British Museum. Another option would have a Greek-influenced representation of Zeus Ammon, a human-headed sphinx with horns. This representation of Zeus Ammon was very popular in Siwa.
Welcome to the Fayum. The Fayum Oasis is an enormous basin in the western desert that formed from the Nile's overflow. As such, it is not considered The Fayum Oasis drains into Lake Moeris, which was a large freshwater lake, but at some time became a saltwater lake. In the reed boats, feluccas, triremes, and kerkeros were the most commonly found craft within the landlocked waters of Egypt. They were used for various purposes, ranging from daily fishing, trade, warfare, and travel, to the ferrying of massive stone blocks used to build the great monuments of Egypt. The most impressive pyramids of ancient Egypt date from the Old Kingdom and can be found on the sites of Giza, Saqqara, and Dashur. However, one particularly famous pyramid of the time is located elsewhere. During the Middle Kingdom, some pharaohs chose the Fayum as their final resting place. One such ruler was Amenemhat III. His pyramid left a mark on the imagination of antique chroniclers. Amenemhat's pyramid was built with a brick core and covered with stone slabs, designed to be impenetrable. The burial chamber, made out of a single block of sandstone, is unique in its design. Richard Lepsius and Flinders Petrie both explored the pyramid site, measuring 385 meters by 158 meters, and identified it as the location of the labyrinth. Their research conditions were difficult, as most of the site had been submerged by the nearby canal. Furthermore, the stones from the complex and the outer casing of the pyramid had been quarried away long ago. Ubisoft decided to give life back to this lost monument and the many crypts that were said to be devoted to the sacred crocodile god, Sobek. Founded during the 5th dynasty, the site was popular during the 12th dynasty under the name of Shedet. During the Ptolemaic era, the metropolis was named Crocodilopolis by the Greeks, in honor of the crocodile god Sobek. During the Greco-Roman era, the Cleruks, soldiers of the Ptolemies, settled there after their military service and expanded the irrigation systems. Irrigation and water distribution tripled the arable land and turned the city into a lush and rich area. 27,000 inhabitants lived in its precinct at its height. The city's location was strategic in controlling the many small waterways connecting to the main canal, and thus the Nile. The region's main cult was that of Sobek of Shedet, a divinity associated with water and fertility, both very important to an area that depended on irrigation. Many local villages had the title Town of Sobek added to their official designation. Very similar to the cult of the Apis bull in Memphis, a living crocodile was worshipped within the precinct of Crocodilopolis' main temple. Known as Sobek to the Egyptians and Sukos to the Greeks, it was reported by Strabo that priests fed it with meat, wine, and honeyed milk. They covered its body with jewels and gold. After its death, it was embalmed and placed within the crocodile's grotto, alongside thousands of other mummified crocodiles. Welcome to the city of Memphis. Throughout all ancient Egyptian periods, cities had one thing in common. They were situated along the Nile's shores. One of the largest was Memphis, located in Lower Egypt. It was a key center for religious. During the Third Dynasty, under Pharaoh Djoser, Memphis became the first. Memphis was also referred to as the City with the 100 Doors, or the White Walls. These names were in reference to the wall which surrounded the city. Under the protection of Ptah, god of craftsmen, the city was a thriving religious and economic hub. Welcome to Rediscovering Egypt. In the 19th century, the increased intensity of tourism and excavations, as well as the outflow of antiquities to other countries, a major step in conserving Egypt's heritage was taken in 1858, when the Viceroy of Egypt created the Antiquities Service. Supported by a team of foreign scholars, Auguste Mariette exerted. Gaston Maspero, Mariette's successor, expanded and reorganized the Antiquities Service and instigated laws regulating the export of artifacts. French scholars ran the service until it passed into Egyptian hands. A French architect, archaeologist, and former researcher, Jean-Claude Golvin, now specializes in the artistic. The team was thrilled to collaborate with Jean-Claude Golvin in order to recreate Egypt for the game. In the 19 exclusive watercolors he created for the team, Golvin used scientific data as the base, and then extrapolated to provide a full interpretation of various locations and monuments in Egypt. Although ancient Egypt's rich religious culture and its mortuary monuments continue to be investigated, the modern discipline of Egyptology has shifted focus. Rather than single-mindedly retrieving it, today, archaeology in Egypt relies on an interdisciplinary approach, where traditional Egyptologists are helped by a wide spectrum of scientists from other disciplines and new, non-invasive techniques. GPS data, satellite imaging, and ground-penetrating radar allow archaeologists to gain a sense of what lies underneath the ground before excavating.
Welcome to... Natron is a colorless salt that was used by ancient Egyptians for food preservation. During the ceremonial embalmment ritual, the priests packed the body in natron in order to remove all... Natron was mined in Wadi Natron. The main mining methods involved either cutting slices out of the lake. Both techniques are still used today and inspired the team in their recreation of the mines located in the mountains northwest of Memphis. Welcome to Fauna of Ancient Egypt. Both domesticated and wild animals were features in ancient Egyptian bas-reliefs as early as the First Dynasty. While the variety of wildlife served as a reliable food source, Egypt's terrain allowed for a diverse range of animals, including panthers, rhinoceroses, elephants, and many variations of antelopes. The Nile was home to many species of fish, along with hippopotami and crocodiles. The wide variety of birds that populated the riverbanks, from raptors and waterfowl to songbirds, were all cataloged within Egyptian hieroglyphic signs. Encounters with reptiles and insects, such as cobras, scorpions, and scarabs, influenced hieroglyphs and art.
Whoa!
While all animals had sacred meanings, lions in particular represented power and royalty to ancient Egyptians. They were so prized by pharaohs that they were hunted to extinction within Egypt. Welcome to Flora of Ancient... The climate and unique geography of the Nile Delta offered a wide variety of plant species. Many of these plants served as sustenance for ancient Egyptians and as crops for trade. The Nile's consistent seasons allowed... Possibly the most useful of the plants was the papyrus. This tall sedge plant grew in abundance along the water's edge of the Nile. There were many types of trees along the River Nile, such as the date palm, carob, and tamarisk. The earliest fruit tree Some trees were associated with gods, such as the acacia with Horus. The divinities Thoth and Seshat were depicted inscribing the reign of the king into a Persea tree. The sycamore was connected with the goddess Iset, patron of the ritual of life. Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphics were used as sacred writing, appearing on... Considered a difficult language, it was intended for pharaohs. The structure of hieroglyphs offers insight into Egyptian culture. In many temples, priests would perform... The most famous of ancient Egyptian documents is the Book of the Dead. Written in hieroglyphs, even after it was deciphered, the reading of hieroglyphs remained difficult. A clue on which way to read. Text written on tomb walls resemble. Compared to alphabetical languages, Egyptian hieroglyphs. Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs contained a little more than 7. Ancient Egyptian languages have many similarities. While hieroglyphs and hieratic script give us an idea as to how the ancient Egyptian... After Alexander the Great's arrival in Egypt and the establishment of his reign, Greek. The spread of Christianity ended pharaonic culture and resulted in the destruction of its pagan monuments. This also marked the end of hieroglyphic writing and understanding. Welcome to Jean Fresque. Between the 5th century CE and the Renaissance, knowledge of hieroglyphs was entirely lost. The Rosetta Stone was found in 1799 by Bouchard, a soldier. The first translation was of the Greek section only in 1803. It detailed a decree of Pharaoh. Through his studies of the stone, Champollion was able to make a critical observation. While studying the stone, Champollion realized that there was a difference in the number. To prove this theory, Champollion began. The next step for Champollion was to confirm that his approach was verifiable. Champollion had already mastered several ancient languages when he took on deciphering the Rosetta Stone. He used his knowledge of Coptic to identify the solar disk hieroglyph on the obelisk as the phonetic translation of Ra. Further translation only strengthened his conclusion. Egyptian hieroglyphs encompass the alphabet in both phonetics and determinative ways, which means that the symbol represents the word itself.
Welcome to Cyrene. Cyrenaica stretches across the coast of northwest Africa. It was known as Pentapolis in antiquity, a reference to the 5 main cities that formed the Greek colonies. The city of Cyrene was founded by Batos Aristotle, guided by the Oracle of Delphi. Overcrowded and suffering, the key features of Cyrene were temples dedicated to gods, Apollo, Demeter, and Zeus, alongside Ptolemy. Under Roman influence, Cyrene became an economic powerhouse, rising in status. From 115 to 117 CE, there was a revolt in the Jewish quarter that greatly The nearby port of Apollonia was an ideal location, with its natural cove, sheltered by 2 islands and rocky inlets. Along with a lighthouse, the port was later equipped with quays and warehouses to accommodate the increased. With its success as a commercial trading port, Apollonia surpassed Cyrene to eventually become the capital of the Pentapolis. A number of earthquakes gradually shifted the city, causing many of its original structures to sink. Some of its ruins can still be seen underwater. Welcome to the Gladiator Arena. While gladiators would not perform in Cyrene until later in the Roman era, the first gladiators to enter the arena were prisoners of war. It was a spectacle. Eventually, volunteers began to enter the ring. For status and money, many of the more skilled combatants. Gladiators were separated into heavy and light armored fighters, each with their own set of specific armor and weapons. Organizers often had 2 audience-favored factions face each other in combat. The events were highly organized. Fights were held with a background of music and supervised by a referee. Death, either in the course of combat or by decision, was not always the only way out for the loser. Several were released due to their performance and gained great notoriety as celebrities.
Welcome to the Agora and Thermal Baths. Cyrene's Agora was the public marketplace and an unnamed statue representing naval victories was the centerpiece of the Agora. The Cyrene Agora also displayed many temples and monuments celebrating its founding king, Batos, and the city gods. The civic buildings included a law court complete with an archive library that would have housed legal documents and other papers. Public baths were common in Roman and Greek cities, and Cyrene held true to this tradition. 2 thermal baths from different eras were discovered among the ruins. Mosaics were originally created for practical reasons, the need to waterproof. The Cyrene baths were fitted into an underground tomb dated somewhere between the 8th and... The Frigidarium, a pool of cold water, was the first room visitors entered. It was followed by the tepid. Later Roman baths were built under Emperor Trajan and then restored under Hadrian. After the earthquake of 365 CE, they were replaced by baths of Byzantine design, with stones from the old thermal baths used in the reconstruction. The team relied on documentation describing the baths built under Trajan in order to create the location available in the game. Welcome to the Temple of Zeus in Cyrene. Facing east towards the rising sun stands the temple dedicated to the cult. The exterior was designed with the decorative elements common to Doric architecture. After the temple was destroyed during the Jewish rebellion, in the time of Augustus, a faithful but smaller imitation of the Olympian Zeus, archaeologists confirmed that there was a monumental statue of Zeus in this temple, though experts remain divided on whether it was one of Zeus or one more specific to the cult of Zeus Ammon. The team elected to place a statue of Zeus Ammon in this location, knowing that Cyrene was central to the spread of this cult in the Greek Mediterranean area.
Welcome to Important Monuments of Cyrene. The Sanctuary of Apollo sits on a prominent edge of the plateau of Cyrene, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. The abundance of temples and statues throughout the city reflect the various Greco-Roman and Egyptian cult influences over the centuries. Temples dedicated to Apollo. A vestibule known as a propylaeum marked its entrance and highlighted the fountain of Apollo. The imposing temple was built on a natural cornice, stretching more than... The altar was located in front of the temple. Both are estimated to be the same age, though restored at different times. Many bulls were sacrificed each year at the altar. Carved during the Roman era, the Apollo cytharide was discovered near the temple. It is considered an important archaeological find. The statue of Apollo was in pieces when it was uncovered. Remarkably, most fragments were found, and the restored statue is currently at the British Museum. The amphitheater of Cyrene is located on what is known as the Terrace of Myrtosa, next to the sanctuary of Apollo. It was built on... Entrances were placed at both ends of the amphitheater. A wall replaced the first two rows of bleachers as protection from the array of wild animals in the... Since the original theater was close to the cliffside, the expansion didn't allow for a perfect circle. Instead, junctions of the semicircle formed the arena into an oval shape. This elliptical formation still ensured an excellent view from all angles. The team decided to create a perfectly round theater for technical reasons, and used the structure of the Roman theater as their reference. Welcome to the Acropolis of Cyrene. Located on the western edge of the city, Cyrene's Acropolis was smaller than the one in Athens, though its high vantage point provided. A number of statuettes have been excavated from the site, including one of Berenice, the daughter of Magus, the king of Cyrene, and half-brother of Ptolemy II. At the northeast tower, there is... In the 20th century, a fortification was built above the ward to defend against an invading army. It covered the ancient remains of nearby Roman houses entirely, and archaeologists have yet to fully excavate them. Welcome to Major Exports of Cyrene. Cyrene's main source of economic wealth was in the cultivation and export of poppies and silphium. Though the opium oil from the poppies was silphium, with its yellow flower, was considered a gift from the sun god. Grown solely in this region near the Mediterranean Sea, silphium extract was exported at high prices and was so crucial to the wealth. Silphium's roots produced a resin used by both the Greek. High demand, overexploitation, and possibly a shift in climate all contributed to the eventual extinction of silphium. The last mention of it dates from the 4th century CE, and to this day, no traces of this plant have been identified. Welcome to Inside Djoser's Step Pyramid. The architect of the Step Pyramid, Imhotep, was a man of great importance to Pharaoh Djoser and ancient Egyptians in general. From the design of the pyramid to the elements within the complex itself, Imhotep set out to create something that would immortalize his king. In addition to the central subterranean palace built for Djoser, 11 wells were dug. Each went to a depth of 33 meters and connected with a horizontal gallery. 2 passages lead underground and branch off in 3 directions to various magazine galleries. The burial chamber of Djoser is located at the bottom of a 28. At the foot of the chamber are many tunnels going in all directions. This maze of... Unlike the Great Pyramid of Giza, or Menkaure, the pharaoh's apartments, also known as the Blue Chambers, are decorated with... There are 2 long rooms running side by side along a north-south axis. The south room has false doors separated by stone panels. The door frames are made of fine limestone and carved with the king's name. As in the south tomb, reliefs are carved into the doorways. These reliefs show the king performing rituals and visiting divine sanctuaries for all eternity. Their interiors are fictive additions made by the team to add to the wonders of the tomb. It is clear from the elaborate detail and scale of the complex that this funerary monument was a technological marvel of its time. Welcome to Sneferu's first pyramid. With the long reign of Sneferu, the first king of the 4th dynasty, the most brilliant and creative pyramid. While Sneferu's monument started as a seven-stepped pyramid, it was later altered into a... The smooth dressing of the walls did not provide sufficient bonding, however, and the outer case... As well as the smooth sides, it was the first time a ceremonial pavement was built, leading from the valley to the temple of the pyramid. Another innovation was that of the funerary chamber, which was no longer at the bottom of a well, but rather above ground level. This change signaled the beginning of the three-bedroom system. Welcome to the Bent Pyramid of Dashur. After the construction of the Meidum Pyramid failed, Sneferu transferred his residence and the official... Though the pyramid also proved unstable and was abandoned, it marked a technical and architectural breakthrough. The Bent Pyramid was unique in having two separate entrances, one on the northern face and another on the western face. The chamber of this pyramid was too small for a human burial. With the Bent Pyramid, architects successfully experimented with a completely new idea: to build the pyramid with a core of huge stones settled on a progressive horizontal design. This way, each construction phase could be completed in a single stage, allowing the architect complete control over every design element. Unfortunately, these precautions did not prevent sagging or cracks in the interior rooms of the pyramid. Sneferu abandoned the monument and began the construction of yet another pyramid. Welcome to the Red Pyramid of Dashur. The Red Pyramid was built 2 kilometers to the north of the Bent Pyramid. It was so named due to the reddish limestone used in its construction. The Red Pyramid reached a height of 105 meters. While the ground level of the Red Pyramid is lower than that of the Bent Pyramid, its height is virtually... The descending corridor of the pyramid, which opens to the north, arrives at ground level, where 2 almost identical spectacular chambers with high ceilings are aligned north to south and connected by a short horizontal passage. The annexes of the Red Pyramid consist of a small funerary temple located to the east. A causeway presumably ran due east from the temple, but it has yet to be excavated. The Red Pyramid was structurally sound, and once finished, marked a remarkable design milestone. Finally successful in his attempts to build himself a suitable funerary monument, Sneferu knew his future beyond death was assured. Welcome to Pyramids of the Middle Kingdom. During the Middle Kingdom era, the powerful rulers of the 12th dynasty resumed the tradition of elaborate pyramidal tombs. The plundering of tombs in troubled times prompted the architects of the Middle Kingdom to devise increasingly complicated means of security during construction. As such, While the architectural plans of the Hawara Pyramid were simpler, the kings of the 13th dynasty began building their pyramids at Masguna, south of Dashur, then moved on to Fayum and Abydos. The kings of the 17th dynasty, however, satisfied themselves with crowning their cave tombs with small pyramids of raw brick. The kings of the 18th dynasty gave up the shape of the pyramid. It was not until the Nubian pharaohs of the 25th dynasty that kings were once again buried under pyramidal tombs. In fact, today, the area of ancient Nubia, modern Sudan, contains a record number of 220 known pyramids to Egypt's 138. Despite their slow decline in use and quality, pyramids continued to fascinate all and sundry up to the Roman era. They remain to this day a symbol of the religious dedication of the pharaohs and the grandeur of ancient Egypt.
Welcome to an overview of the Giza Necropolis. The Giza Plateau is located on the west bank of the Nile and was considered by ancient Egyptians as the domain of the dead. The pyramidal complexes found there were built over the span of 3 generations. The Giza area, now famous for its 3 pyramids, is part of a wider grouping of funerary complexes. Rulers from this period. The placement of the Giza monuments, and particularly that of the pyramids, followed a practical yet strict alignment. First, they focused on cardinal points, and then they accounted for the natural geology of the plateau. Welcome to the riddle. A sphinx was originally meant to be a personification. Over the centuries, enthusiasts and historians alike have wondered, who built the sphinx? Another theory suggests that the sphinx was built. While ancient Egypt as a whole leaves a rather monochrome vision of its monuments and statuary, it is vital to understand that in ancient times, red had a strong symbolism in ancient Egypt. Dating from the 4th dynasty, approximately 2600 to 2500, in order to bring polish to the imposing monument, several blocks of limestone were added after the initial construction phase. Since then, there have been numerous attempts. The Sphinx as a whole was carved in situ from a natural stone. The natural bedrock is seen through the oblique natural strata of the Sphinx's body. Since antiquity, people have always believed there was a hidden tomb deep within the Sphinx. It is thought that attempts to plunder the Sphinx began as far back as the 12 meters long and cut during pharaonic times. Another entrance in the back of the Sphinx aroused curiosity. While there have been no major discoveries pertaining to the Sphinx of Giza in recent years, theories and hypotheses continue to emerge. The first of the main theories as to the Sphinx of Giza's meaning posits that the Sphinx was original. Several scientific projects using new technologies have been put in place. What the Sphinx of Giza represented during its construction and how the Sphinx was perceived by the Egyptians of the New Kingdom are two very different matters. Amenhotep II built a second temple dedicated for the Sphinx as Horamaket. Egyptologist Mark Lehner believed that Amenhotep II built a statue of himself anchored between the paws of the Sphinx, likely to legitimize his reign. While sleeping between the Sphinx's paws, the 15-ton dream stela built by Thutmose IV to commemorate his dream was discovered. That same year, Cavillia discovered a popular cultural legend purports that the nose of the Sphinx of Giza was lost during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte to the cannon fire of French soldiers in training. However, engravings from before the time of that. The most plausible hypothesis is based on the research of the German historian Ulrich Harman. During the 1980s, Harman compiled medieval sources written by Arab authors. In doing so, he discovered that the Sphinx was once perceived as a favorable omen, a deity supporting sediment-nurturing floods and crops. Around 1378, a Sufi by the name of Muhammad Sa'im al-Dar could not stand this vision of the monument, and in an iconoclastic act, broke the nose of the Sphinx. According to the texts, he was then hanged and burned between the legs of the Sphinx for his crime. The most plausible hypothesis is based on the research of the German historian Ulrich Harman. During the 1980s, Harman compiled medieval sources written by Arab authors. In doing so, he discovered that the Sphinx was once perceived as a favorable omen, a deity supporting sediment nurturing floods and crops. Around 1378, a Sufi by the name of Muhammad Sa'im al-Dar could not stand this vision of the monument, and in an iconoclastic act, broke the nose of the Sphinx. According to the texts, he was then hanged and burned between the legs of the Sphinx for his crime.
Welcome to Khufu's funerary complex. The Valley Temple was the first architectural component encountered when one entered the funerary complex. It was considered the official entrance of the tomb and mixed the structural components of both it. Khufu's causeway ran from the floodplain up to the plateau, linking together the Valley Temple and the Mortuary Temple. A traditional causeway presented itself as a paved path, enclosed by wall. Fragments discovered by archaeologists indicate that the walls in Khufu's causeway, one of the longest known to us, were decorated with carvings and possibly paint. The most impressive private cemeteries of Giza are located east and west of Khufu's pyramid. The Eastern Cemetery was reserved for members of the royal family, while the Western Cemetery was mostly set aside for various To the east of Khufu's pyramid reside three smaller constructions, the three Queen's Pyramids. The northernmost pyramid was most likely meant for Queen Hetepheres, who is believed to have been Khufu's mother. However, in 1925, her actual tomb was discovered nearby by accident. It was hidden at the bottom of a deep masonry pit in an underground chamber. Within the concealed chamber, Egyptologists discovered the most complete royal funerary equipment. Within the vicinity of Khufu's pyramid, Egyptologists have uncovered 7 boat pits. The exact function. The 2 southern boat pits, each covered by a roof of huge limestone slabs, were discovered in 1954 by Kamal al-Malak, an Egyptian Egypt. The Greek term pyramidion refers to the capstone of a pyramid. A few pyramidia have been retrieved from pyramidal complexes. The earliest, found in Dashur, is undoubtedly The pyramidia of the pyramids of Giza were never recovered. The reconstitution you see in the game is fictive, incorporating a golden pyramidion bearing inscriptions relevant to Khufu.
Welcome to Secrets of the Great. Built around 2550 BCE, the Great Pyramid of Giza is considered one of the most iconic structures of Egypt. It is the biggest of the pyramids and the only one of the 7. The construction of the Great Pyramid was also a display of power and opulence on the part. New insights into engineering and ancient Egyptian culture are still being revealed over 4,000. It is interesting to note that by Cleopatra's time, the pyramid's celestial purpose. The Egyptians had polished their design for centuries by the time. Precisely oriented north-south to the 4 cardinal points of a compass. In order to achieve the shape of a true pyramid, the design required many considerations. Materials for the Great Pyramid consisted of quarried limestone blocks, weighing between 2 to 15 tons each. It's estimated that it took between 600,000 and 2 million blocks of stone to build the Great Pyramid. Experts calculate it would have required men to move 12. While the interior chambers were built with red granite from Aswan, most of the pyramid was made from local limestone. The recently discovered logbook confirms that the high-quality limestone. Over the centuries, thieves and travelers attempted to access the Great Pyramid numerous times. Ancient writings describe. The main entrance of the Great Pyramid is located 17 meters above ground level. It faces north, likely in order to align with the north. The robber's entrance is reported to have been opened in the 9th century by Caliph al. Attempts to gain entry to the Great Pyramid and uncover its potential secrets continued throughout the centuries. In the 19th century, the belief that another entry existed at the south side resulted in a hole being blasted into the pyramid side, with no results for the damage that was done. While the search is still ongoing today to uncover more hidden rooms and passageways, conservation is the primary concern of all such efforts. Welcome to the Great Pyramid. From the original entrance of the Great Pyramid, there is a passage. While the original passage was 145 meters long, the well shaft was a 58-meter vertical passage. There is much speculation over the purpose of the well shaft. One theory is that the channel was cut or enlarged to support. There is a subterranean chamber at the end of the descending corridor, 30 meters below. The chamber also contains an 11-meter pit near the east side. It's unclear. The subterranean chamber's original purpose remains a mystery. One popular theory is that it was originally meant to be Khufu's burial chamber, but the pharaoh changed his mind, preferring to be buried higher up in the pyramid, which would explain the chamber's unfinished state.
Welcome to the Great Pyramid of Giza, Upper Chambers. At the entrance of the ascending passage are three, while in reality the robber's entrance is one single cavity, which the ascending passageway of the Great Pyramid. The ascending corridor has smooth masonry on its walls, and the layout includes many trapezoids. The Grand Gallery's purpose is still debated among experts. It may have been intended to align with the stars, act as a buffer to protect the king's chamber, or simply to facilitate the transport of the granite blocks used inside the pyramid. Access to the queen's chamber was at the beginning of the Grand Gallery. Though this room is referred to as the queen's chamber, it is believed that there was. Situated exactly within the pyramid's center, on the east-west axis of the pyramid, the chamber has a vaulted ceiling and measures 5.7 by 5.2 meters. In the 19th century, two shafts were found running through the north and south walls. A recent scan of the room indicated the presence of an unknown cavity hidden behind the north face of the walls over the descending corridor. Further investigation is still ongoing to ascertain the nature of the anomaly, so as to avoid risking damage to the monument. Khufu's architects were possibly influenced by earlier rhomboidal pyramids. While the space is visually dramatic, the gallery seemed to serve a practical function, though at the end of the Grand Gallery is the entrance. The far end of the Grand Gallery leads to a small antechamber with a portcullis, preventing access to the king's chamber. For the purposes of the game, the team elected to remove the portcullis slabs in order to grant the player access to the king's chamber. The king's chamber is built entirely out of red granite. As in the queen's chamber, two shafts extend out. There is a granite sarcophagus at the west end of. Khufu's mummy was never found. It is hoped that as of yet undiscovered hidden rooms and shafts of the pyramid may provide an answer as to its location. Welcome to Jean-Pierre Houdin's Theories. The team wanted to provide players with a sense of exploration and discovery, particularly within the Great Pyramid. As such, a decision was made that the internal design of the monument in the game, while respecting Houdin's hypothesis as to the general layout of the antechambers, the team wanted the contents to enhance the game experience. In regular royal tombs, the antechambers were filled with all the material goods needed by the pharaoh in the afterlife. To support the Houdet theorized that the ascending corridor and the Great Gallery were used by the workers to haul hoist the heavy beams above the king's chamber. He called it the service circuit. The corridor. With this structure in mind, one can easily assume that the pyramid's entrance would have been connected to the two antechambers. Modern research has revealed that a cavity might be located behind the north face chevrons of the pyramid. As such, the team chose to create this area for the player to explore. Many theories regarding the construction of the Great Pyramid rely on the usage of external ramps. However, Houdet's theory states that this internal ramp followed the sides of the pyramid in an ascending spiral pattern. A notch discovered in the edge of the Great Pyramid, known as Bob's Room, seems to support this theory. Located at the corners of each edge, this long corridor was the first section of the ascending internal ramp. Through it, the blocks used to build the Great Pyramid would have been carefully moved upward and then turned at each edge of the pyramid in order to continue their ascent. Though the team only created the main ramp for the game, Houdet posits, according to Houdet, the start of the inner ramp was located at the base of the southeastern face of the pyramid. This location would have been the junction point of the external and internal ramps. Below us, workers would have built the lower part of the pyramid with the external ramp before eventually switching to the internal ramp for the middle and upper sections of the pyramid. At that time in the process, they could have reused the material of the external ramp to fill the center of the pyramid, hauling the stones in through the internal ramp. Welcome to Khafre's funerary complex. Since the very beginning of the 4th dynasty, mortuary temples were built adjacent to pyramids on the eastern side. Such a location in its standard form, a mortuary temple was divided into two parts. A front area which consisted of a vestibule. The largest of all such structures, Khafre's mortuary temple was entirely built with megalithic blocks of limestone from a nearby quarry and encased with granite. Parts of Khafre's mortuary temple, particularly Khufu's direct successor, Djedefre, followed the custom which required each king to establish a new site for their funerary accommodation, and chose Abu Rawash as his last resting place. When the time came to build his own funerary complex, Khafre, also one of Khufu's sons and the successor to Djedefre, broke with tradition. Though Khafre's pyramid is smaller than Khufu's, it was cunningly built on a more elevated bedrock layer than the Great Pyramid, making it appear higher than any other pyramid at Giza. Today, considered a most sacred area, the Giza Necropolis was strictly from the reign of Sneferu and onwards. The subsidiary in mainstream media, the Ka is often defined as the within Khafre's subsidiary pyramid, a wooden box containing pieces of cedar was discovered by archaeologists. When reassembled, it turned out to be a shrine mounted on a sled. Just as with the solar barges found around Khufu's pyramid, it seems Khafre's shrine and sled were ritually disposed of after his funeral.
Welcome to Menkara's funerary complex. The dimensions of Menkara's pyramid are much less grandiose. However, unlike its predecessors, Menkara's pyramid shows a great deal of... Menkara's pyramid contains two sloping passages, both located in the northern side of the structure. One was abandoned during the construction phase, whereas the lower one, slightly above the base of the... While Menkara's pyramid complex was unfinished at the time of his death, it was hastily and somewhat shabbily completed by his successor, Shepsakov. Even so, this funerary structure marks... Menkara's causeway was completed in mud brick by the king's successor, whereas the lower part was nothing more than a simple ramp. As for the Valley Temple, it was... Three small structures, referred to as Menkara's Queen's Pyramids, were erected along the southern side of the main pyramid. One of them was The easternmost pyramid was built with the traditional rooms and corridors found within a satellite pyramid meant to house the king's ka. However, a granite sarcophagus was found within, leading to the conclusion that it was used as an actual tomb rather than as a symbolic cenotaph. Drawing on these observations, some assume that this pyramid was first built as a satellite pyramid for the king's ka, before seeing its purpose change to that of a queen's tomb. Which queen, however, remains a mystery.
Will no one listen to me? Rumors from Thebes abound. The gods are angry. Stories of horrors unimaginable, brought forth by golden light from the gods.
Golden light from the gods. When they rode to Thebes, I may want to investigate these horrors. Dark Spirit has unleashed these soldiers. Do I dream?
am lucky to be alive. I was attacked by corpses, just like soldiers.
I met them myself. How did you come to be here?
I came in search of the lost army of Cambyses.
That is an old legend. Thousands of men lost forever in a sandstorm.
I believe they carried much gold. As I approached, I saw a golden light. At last, I thought the gods have chosen me for the treasure of the lost army.
Are you an adventurer or a grave robber?
A man must live. I entered and saw many bodies, dead these centuries, and beyond them, a glowing object. I grabbed it and immediately heard strange sounds. I quickly loaded it onto my camel, when suddenly, horrifying soldiers attacked. The camel fled into the desert.
Yeah. I will help you get to safety.
No. You must find my camel and bring back the glowing object. I am certain that it brought the lost army back from the dead.
I will find out what happened. Stay hidden here. There's the camel. What are they doing? Oh, poor animal. This is it. I must return it to its place and end this nightmare. I have recovered the object! Where has he gone? Are you here? Something must be behind here. Let's get you where you belong. Where am I?
Ah, you are awake at last. We found you wandering dazed in the desert.
Where's the adventurer? And the object?
We found only you, muttering about the lost army.
I battled with soldiers returned from the Duat.
Let us pray you were simply overcome by heat. These strange rumors from Thebes terrify everyone. Pray, Osiris, that none are true. That eagle deserves your thanks. Nomads saw it circling in the desert.
She is a good friend.